Exploring free will. To live an authentic story and create deep futures, we have to ask deep questions. We're all comprised of biological and physical matter. We are the dust of stars, and then something more. I'm a futurist, so naturally I like to talk about the future. But the discourse on the future cannot merely be about making better machines, nor just about living more comfortable and satiated lives. We must think deeply about how we choose to live, how we choose to die, how we might rise above our cultural and biological shortcomings to become something greater. Can we awaken from the mind, from the shadow, and from our own darkness? Can we achieve our highest potential as a species? Or are we going to create a nightmare future, perhaps even destroy ourselves because, despite our cleverness, we've not grown wise enough to master our shortcomings? Perhaps the most important point to glean from ideas like integrated intelligence and wisdom is that free will is an essential component of human consciousness. If there are sources of information beyond our own finite minds that we can deliberately access or which come to us spontaneously, that arrangement must operate in a dynamic where we humans have the choice to take heed of that information, or, alternatively, to ignore it. We are effectively being given the choice of how to take wise or unwise actions because in that process we humans have the opportunity to become wiser and nobler as a species. Without free will, that learning, that gleaning of wisdom would not be possible. We would simply be automatons, no more likely to become wise than would our refrigerator when we adjust its settings. There's long been a heated scientific debate on free will, and as the 20th century entered its final decades, the general consensus in scientific circles became that free will is an illusion generated by the brain. The concept of human intentionality was thus seen as a self-contradiction. For many philosophers and intellectuals, it was the 1983 Benjamin Libet free will experiment that was the final nail in free will's coffin. In that experiment, it was determined that there was a spike in neuronal activity a fraction of a second before a person thought they'd made a decision to tap their fingers. This seemed to be strong evidence that the brain makes you do it. And this conclusion is perfectly in accordance with the mechanistic paradigm that underpins modern neuroscience. After all, in that worldview, the idea that a thought makes the brain do something is an absurdity, an obvious dualism indicating that there's some kind of ghost in the machine driving the human vehicle. We humans have thus recently lived through an age where consciousness itself has typically been dismissed by philosophers and scientists, such as Daniel Dennett and Richard Dawkins, as an evolutionary epiphenomenon, an accidental byproduct of our biological development. Here the mind is viewed as an illusion, one tolerated by nature because it helps ensure the body survives long enough to reproduce and pass on its genetic information to the next generation. However, in more recent times, the popular interpretation of Libet's experiment has been effectively debunked. For example, in an influential 2012 paper, neuroscientist Aaron Scherger and colleagues suggested that the brain's readiness potential merely contributes to the decision and is not a marker of it. Further, it can be pointed out that many of our important decisions are ultimately far more complex than deciding whether or not to move a small body part. Indeed, they may involve great complexity, multiple cognitive experiences, and time spans of minutes, hours, or even years. The academic debate on free will goes on, but for me, it's effectively irrelevant to the kind of self-reflective, introspective work I'm speaking about in this Power and Presence course. Biologist Rupert Sheldrake points out that even scientists who are certain there's no free will still go about their business as if they have the power to choose. They still plan for the next vacation, still reflect on what to teach their graduate class the following semester, and still flick through the TV channels before making up their minds about what to watch. And regardless of the fact that author Marcus T. Anthony considers free will to be central to what it means to be human, I suggest that you, the reader, do what the aforementioned skeptical men and women of science do, not what they say. Act as if free will is a thing. Nonetheless, the truth is that none of us is perfectly free. None of us has complete self-determination. Our bodies are the product of 3.5 billion years of earthly evolution, and the vast majority of what occurs in those bodies and in our minds lies outside of our awareness. Indeed, the whole point of self-work is to bring significant, targeted parts of that unconscious data into awareness. The human psyche is a reservoir of information and impulse, where the emotional body registers and processes great streams of knowledge, at least some of which we can learn to deliberately read. Beyond that, I believe that we humans are embedded within consciousness fields that are saturated with both information and intentionality, and from multiple external sources. When we strip the mind from its narrative, drama, and general babble, we can learn to bring attention to a space of awareness which resides beyond the thinking mind. When we bring mindfulness to our possible choices within that space, we've accessed what I call the moment of agency. This mindful space also represents the gateway to integrated intelligence. In the rest of the session, we're going to explore how this moment of agency is the site of a vast potential wisdom and intelligence, and why it's essential for the development of the deep self.